So I'm not a pastor anymore. And when I was a pastor, I had a season in my life that I was so unaware of myself. And so I had to, actually, I'll tell you about it. It was the show The Office. The Office became salvation to me. It was watching Michael Scott. And for those of you who are fans of The Office, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those of you who are not, there's this guy, and he's a boss of this company, and it's a paper company. We live in a digital world, so the point is, it's like a company that really doesn't have anything to offer in this new world. And he has this mug that says world's greatest boss. And he has this illusion that everybody loves coming to work for him. And that everybody he gets into all these really awkward situations because he's so unaware of himself. And there's some elements that are kind of cute and adorable about it. But most of the time, everybody's just begging. It's cringy, like, please be self-aware. And so that's how I felt. And watching The Office, as I'm personally criticizing Michael Scott for being so dumb and so ridiculous and so unaware, and I realized, wait, am I the unaware one? I'm the pastor thinking I'm the world's greatest pastor, and I'm thinking everybody loves my product that I'm selling, and everybody loves to be part of this family that I'm creating. And so I started writing a list of things that would keep me self-aware. And as there's something really powerful about writing. When you start writing, you start to find things inside of you that you didn't know they were there. Some really beautiful things, some really creative, magical things, and some things that are like, this is really what I'm thinking. There's something about you and the paper where you can be radically honest. And so I started writing these lists, kind of like self-awareness list, and I would love to share that with you because it's a list that keeps updating over and over again. I'm not a pastor anymore. I'm not working at a church anymore as I used to, but I am leading a nonprofit, and so I find myself falling for the same traps. I find myself in need of self-awareness, and I hope that maybe as we cringe together on my terrible parts, that maybe it'll help you be less of a Michael Scott. Let's go. This list is very personal. It's kind of embarrassing, and it's also invitational. So let's cringe together. Number 1, when I exaggerated the story, or AKA embellished the truth, AKA, what do you call that? When based on a true story, when Hollywood makes a movie and it's based on a true story, and when you actually dig in Wikipedia or actual books of the history, the embellishment is really ridiculous. So as a pastor, I found myself with the microphone in church telling people that Jesus will set you free and the truth is the most important thing, and I'm telling stories and I'm embellishing them, right? 100 people came forward, but I'm like, there was like 330 people that came forward. And I love historical novels, right? I love reading. I wrote this book called La Conquistadora recently, Esmeralda Santiago, a wonderful historical novel. I know that I'm reading something that's based on truth, but it's mostly, like the movies, based on the truth. But the thing is, I was on a platform where people are expecting me to say it exactly as it is. And the beautiful thing about the truth is that it is beautiful enough just being exactly as it is. And why would I say 330 when it was 100? 100 was special. 100 was the truth, and the truth in itself is valuable. And so I'm not talking for any other preacher, any other person with a platform, any other person that shares content online. I'm talking for me. I have to be very intentional, and I have my beautiful wife who's working over there, who would look at me from the front row and give me a face, and, thank you, Catherine, because she would call me out, not right there at the moment, you're lying. Maybe she should have, maybe sometimes, but she would always call me out when we got home. And she did it enough times, which she shouldn't have needed to do it enough times, but she did it enough times for me to realize, why am I even lying? Like, what's the point in adding numbers? Oh, it's because I'm insecure. Oh, it's because I want to appear like something that I'm not. Well, why do I do that? Well, maybe I don't really love myself. Maybe I'm really terrified that people are going to think I'm inadequate, that I don't matter, that what happened doesn't matter.
Is there a thing that you wanted to prove, like, in this time of your life where you were a pastor to all these people, because you're telling about all the things that you were exaggerating about in the preachings. is there something that you discovered you really wanted to prove to people?
Yeah, that's basically it. I'm trying to prove, right, my value. You guys are paying me to be a pastor, so I need to prove my value monetarily. You're consuming what I'm saying as somehow coming from a higher place. The fact that I have a microphone on a Sunday and people are coming to not just be entertained, but in somehow be fed spiritually, emotionally. And so, yeah, I'm trying to prove my value, trying to prove my worth, trying to prove that I'm something. I'm trying to heal these wounds from the past when sometimes my parents would say that wasn't good enough, right? I would get a B and it wasn't an A, and they wouldn't celebrate the B because I needed to have an A. And so...
I have a question. Like, so when did it become that way? And also, why did you even start being a pastor? How did you felt the calling, and how everything went downhill after a certain point?
Yeah, and so maybe becoming a pastor was always part of that original lie. And the original lie is you're not good enough. And so in order to be good enough, especially in a spiritual context, in a Christian context, the top job would be pastor. And so I grew up with that, like, if you're going to be something, you have to be the best at that thing. And there's some value to that. There's some beautiful things, right, about like trying hard and trying to do your best. But that's in the context of work, right? That's in the context of your talent. That is in the context of something that you're passionate about and you're putting time and effort into that talent, that work, that passion. But it's not in the context of your value. And that's the problem. When you mix the work with your value, when your worth is tied up to what you do. And so you multiply that by 1,000,000 times in the church context. And so I'm telling people, David, I'm using this language like God loves everybody, but I got to prove that he kind of, that I'm really loved because I do all these special spiritual things. And becoming a pastor in a bizarre way was part of that journey. It might have been part of a lie the whole time of me trying to correct the lie that I'm not good enough. And I can tell you right now, honestly, and I was just talking about my wife, sometimes Catherine will bring something up that we need to work on in our marriage, and it's 100% something we should be working on. And my first reaction is like, oh, I'm never good enough for you. That's my first. Still, I'm 30 something. Sorry, I'm lying there. I'm embellishing the truth. I'm 41, turning 42. And the natural thing is to react like I'm not good enough. Right? Something is not going perfectly here at work, and I'm already have that anxiety, like we're not doing good enough, or I'm not doing good enough as a leader. So I take it personal in that sense. So thank you for your question, because it's something that I've had to grapple with the fact that this role, this job that I had for so many years, might have started because of a wound, because of a lie, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to disregard all those beautiful people that I was able to pastor, all the lessons that I learned while I was pastoring. But I feel now that I'm closer to my truer self. And I know I'm closer to my truer self because when I'm talking to people, I don't have that need to exaggerate. And that's like liberation to me. Okay, number 2. This is when I ignored my emotions. And emotions are like you're driving a car and the car is indicating you velocity, temperature. I mean, the newer cars tell you the tire pressure. They tell you if you've got an electric car, it's telling you how much battery do you have left. And so the car's job, or the dashboard's job, is to tell you what's happening under the hood. And I think emotions are kind of like that. They're speaking to you about what's happening on the inside. And so unfortunately for me, and I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. This is my list. But unfortunately for me, it was the negative emotions that would explode in a very negative way because I was ignoring what was happening. I was ignoring all the signals. This is a signal right here. Look, like sometimes the tension that you're carrying, sometimes how you are quicker than other days to like overreact to something. Sometimes it's being hungry. That's okay. Sometimes your sugar levels are low and you have moments, but it's important and I'm going to go back to myself. I would ignore my emotions. I would ignore the uncomfortable feelings. Somebody's making me do something I don't want to do, and they're really good at making me and, manipulating me into doing it. And I have this macho thing like, I only do what I want to do, but all of a sudden I find myself in a complete situation when I'm doing something that somebody else wanted me to do. But the problem was, instead of addressing it right there, instead of having the courage to say, hey, I'm feeling this, and having the conversation with them, no, I'm going to stuff it down. And you know when it's coming out? It's coming out with the most important people in my life. It would come out with my wife and my children and my parent and my closest friends. And so I'm ignoring what's happening under the hood. And then everybody who's a passenger in this journey of my life, it's struggling. It's paying the price. And so I needed to learn how to catch myself. Okay, this is what I'm feeling. I really hate this moment. I hate this interaction, this conversation, or I'm really stressed and I actually need to stop, or I'm really angry, or I'm actually really sad. I'm grieving something and I'm not giving myself space to grieve. And grief sometimes, for me, mostly became anger. And if I just grieved, then if I just gave myself time to grieve, then I wouldn't fall into the traps of anger and rage coming out towards those who wanted to help me grieve. And so ignoring my emotions was one of my biggest issues, my biggest traps. Hopefully I'm doing better. I'm learning slowly but surely to listen to myself, to honor myself. And this is something my therapist, this is the language that he helped me, Dolan Williams, if you're watching. Love you, bro. He taught me this lesson. He taught me this simple statement: radically accept yourself. You're not saying that what you're feeling is right or wrong. You're just radically accepting that that's what you're feeling right now. And now that you're radically accepting, this is what I'm feeling. I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm desperate, I'm nervous, I'm insecure. If you radically accept it, then you can address it. And then you can give yourself the space. This feeling is so overwhelming. I need a therapist. I need a professional to talk to. Or this feeling, this is just because I haven't connected with my wife. This other feeling, this one, I just need to take a deep breath and just push through and be mature and overcome it, right? It's not like all the feelings need to take you to the therapist, and it's not like all the feelings need to be stuffed down. It's not like all the feelings but you learn to listen to yourself, to acknowledge, to radically accept what you're feeling, and they'll deal with it like an adult, not like a petulant child like I was. Te amo, Catherine. Gracias por soportarme. Good. Okay. Number 3.
Maybe I can. I will ask you a question.
No.
This. Okay.
No
this
right or wrong questions.
It's hard to formulate, but okay. Okay. There's many times in life where emotions feels like reality. That it feels so real, so overwhelming, as you said, that it makes a deal with your reason, with logic, and you find any way possible to justify that emotion and canalize it.
Yeah,
because it's
so
almost like the emotion is alive and it wants to come out and manifest in your daily lives.
Yeah.
When was or how was the moment where you figured out, like in a bigger picture? Was it with your therapist, like when you said he showed you about radical acceptance of all stuff, but when did you had the shift, or when did you see yourself in the position that you needed this shift? Did something happen where your life was in the borderline of total critic? situation.
Yeah.
Can you explain that moment? Because many people I
Thank
feel
you.
that are going downhill and
Yeah.
they need to like push to rock bottom,
Yeah.
and but maybe listening to someone's rock bottom stories,
Yeah, good.
like make help prepared some people to
Yeah,
like
yeah.
for
Thank you,
that.
Lynn. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, rock bottom. Rock bottom. It's so hard because rock bottom, it's both so necessary and at the same time so preventable. Right? But I hit rock bottom when, well, how I was aware. I think the first thing sometimes is even being aware that you're at rock bottom. And I was aware that I was rock bottom. This is so weird. My wife and I were watching 12 Years a Slave, the movie 12 Years a Slave. And there's a scene where this slave owner is destroying the back of this slave woman who previously in the first hour of the film, that's the slave that he loves the most, and he's having sex with her, and he's got like a weird affection to her. So there's this white man with the whip destroying the back of this slave woman who he's had some emotions towards. And as we're watching this together, I have the horrific realization that if I was born in the time of that man, I probably would have been like him. I had that thought. Like in this story, right? Because I'm always, especially as a Christian leader, I'm the hero of the story. I'm telling people Jesus is the hero of the story, but I'm formulating this world where I'm the hero of the story. And I'm watching this movie, and for the first time in a long time, I had this moment of realizing maybe if I was alive then, that would have been me. And I lost it crying. I collapse on the floor. We stop the movie. Catherine's like, what's happening? What's happening? And I begin to properly, from here, not just here, but from here, I start to say, I'm so sorry, my darling wife, the ways that I've been aggressive, the ways that I've created an environment and energy of anger, the ways that I've kind of like in an argument just punched a hole on the wall to kind of threaten you. I've behaved like a grizzly bear instead of a loving husband. The way that, and I had to verbalize it. I had to radically accept that moment, and I had to verbalize, props to her that she walked the journey with me, but I had to verbalize, I think I'm that guy. And maybe in that historical context, that's how I would have behaved because I could have gotten away with it. And maybe I'm not doing worse because I'm afraid that I can't get away with it, but deep inside, that's what I would do. And it's horrible to even say it. And this is 8 years ago. That was me realizing my rock bottom, me realizing that actually I was creating an unsafe home for my wife, for my children, that I was just pushing the envelope just enough that I can get away with it, but deep inside it was much worse. There was much rage, anger, violence, patriarchy, misogyny, hatred that I needed to confront, that I needed to address, that I needed to repent using some Christian language, that I needed to correct, that I needed to address, that I needed others to know. Because in my mind, the worst thing is to be canceled. And I'm right here to say, cancel culture was salvation for me in a way. It was like, all these behaviors you're having, we would all disregard you if you had those behaviors. And in a way, being like canceled was a way for me to be like, that was my rock bottom. And that was like, I'm going to address this. I'm going to work through it, but not so I can be uncanceled, whatever that looks like in different platforms for different people, but so that I could save my marriage, so that I could be a better person, so that I could be a better husband, a better father, a better leader, a better human being, so I could be okay with myself, that I could honestly say from the depths of my heart, watching that movie 8 years later, if I was in that context, now it wasn't a certainty, maybe I'll be him. No, now it's like, if I was in that context, how I'm feeling right now, I would hope, I'm not saying I would, but I would hope that I would be a gentle man who would fight for the liberation of the people who are being oppressed. And that's, in a way, part of the work that we're doing here at the Happy Givers. And the temptation would be to try to do things to prove that you are not who you are, right? Oh, let me be really about liberation and about fighting oppression, because really on the inside I'm an oppressor, if I'm really honest. That's the temptation. Let me do the work to pretend to be something I'm not. No, the invitation is like, really face the worst of yourself. Really find the darkness. Really get in the dark cave of the worst things about you, of your worst emotions, of your worst behaviors, of your worst temptations, and be radical, have radical honesty to say, whether right or wrong, this is how I'm feeling. Now, how do I move forward? How do I heal? How do I forgive? How do I ask forgiveness? How do I correct? How can I be better? Because we're all in that journey, and pretending like we're not, it's stupid.
And it's so interesting because it's almost like it's even more powerful than that, because I think that your mistakes basically are the things that help you create what you're creating today.
Yeah.
Like, we're so scared of our mistakes,
Sure.
but if we take even your example, your mistakes, all that you put in the blog afterwards. I would like you to talk about it if you can, but like basically fueled everything that you are doing now.
Crazy.
So basically your glory, like thanks to God, that glory is based on your mistakes, not on your strengths.
Yeah.
So
the Christian language is from ashes to beauty, beauty from ashes. That's the language. We're all afraid of our mistakes, and in a way, it's okay to be kind of afraid of our mistakes, because some mistakes cost people's lives. I drink too much and I drive. That mistake can be the death of somebody else, right? So we have to. It's that beautiful tension, that painful tension, that terrifying tension of, okay, here are things that I've done wrong, and I'm going to fully accept that I've done wrong, not so I can get away with it again, but so I can correct, so I can do better, so I can create something different, right? And so, and it wasn't just my mistake. It was the mistake of my father, who was an alcoholic, who was abusive. And it is a mistake of a generation of men in Puerto Rico, like my grandfather and uncles and other people outside of my family, right? There were these cultural things, but I can't put it on the culture. I can't even put it on how I was raised. I can't put it on. My dad is a wonderful man. He's one of my best friends in the world. He himself got restored his marriage. He's a shining example of from the worst coming the best. But there were prices to pay. There's divorce. There's broken families, right? There's children that have to live in two different homes. There's people that live a lie for their whole lives. There's organizations that are doing really good work, and then there's this one big mistake from the leader, and then there's a mess, right? And so that's the tension. How can we learn from the mistakes, right? To not be repeated? How can we be honest with others about those mistakes so that we can move forward? And then hopefully, David, we can get to the point where we can look back and say, from the worst, the best. Number 4, ese fue número 3. Sí, ¿verdad? Sí. Número 1, when I exaggerated the story. Número 2, when I ignored my emotions. Número 3, when I pretend that... No, what was that one?
Number 2.
That was number 2. So we'll do one more. Let's do one more, and then we'll have lunch. Eso es uno solo, sí, y seguimos. Pueden ser 3. Muy bien. Okay, number 3. When I pretended like the news didn't matter. And I'll explain this. As a pastor, I use this spiritual language of like, no, I'm not going to care what's happening in politics, what's happening in the other side of the world, because I'm just so focused. That was an excuse to actually not face the horrible things that were happening around the world. Because then if I faced them, I would be challenged to talk about them, to contextualize them in the context of the gospel, which I was meant to be preaching. And I was doing all that because I knew that I could say something that would offend the big donors of the church. So I would, if I'm really honest, I was pretending like, no, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to focus on God, focus on my family. But I was ignoring all that because I knew that talking about things could get me in trouble. And there's this quote, what's that quote from Upton Sinclair? He said, a man will not, let me find it because I think I have it here. Córtame ahí. ¿Dónde está ese quote? Es que lo escribí. Ah, míralo aquí. Déjame moverlo. Lo puse donde no era. There's a... See? Okay. I found it. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And so my fear was that I was going to offend the audience, which was the audience that was giving offerings that turned into my salary. It's as simple as that. And I wish I would have been honest at that moment about that. And I'm telling you this, and why it's on the list is because I still have to think about that. Because here I am on a podcast, right? I'm leading this organization. We need money to run the organization, to cook more meals, to grow our farm, to serve more families, to pay 20-something salaries, right? So I'm fully aware that I could say one small thing that may be even misinterpreted. It wouldn't even be a wrong thing that I say. It might just be a wrong thing that I communicate in a way that is interpreted wrongly and then shared, and then all of a sudden donations dry up. That can happen. That happens to people with platforms, right? That happens to people that have podcasts. That happens to people, whether famous or not famous, whether they have a church, a big church or a small church, a big organization or not. And so it's a risk, right? But I prefer now the risk of sincerity, the risk of maybe I'm wrong, but I'm a process. And as my friend David Dark says, to love a human is to love a process. We're all in process of growth, in process of change. If it would be crazy to interview me 8 years ago, like imagine I could somehow interview myself 8 years ago, our theology would be different. Our thoughts on life, on culture, everything would be different. And that's okay. That's kind of the point. And that's kind of the point of these conversations, that we give each other grace to grow while at the same time being clear and direct about where we are right now. And so I can be clear and direct about, for example, the situation in Palestine. I feel very clearly and directly that we need to stop the bombing, we need to stop the genocide. And so that could have, in my past life as a pastor, that would have gotten me into so much trouble because of so much of the theology about Israel and church. And still today, I have friends who have called me up for things that we've posted about the conflict in Israel and Palestine, who are like, no, you're saying the wrong thing. You're missing this other side of the story. We're all missing some part of the story. But I prefer now, in sincerity, saying, this is where I stand. This is what I believe. We need to speak about these issues. We need to speak against oppression. We need to speak against injustice. And knowing fully that I don't have the full picture, knowing fully that I could have some elements that are right or wrong, but I'm not going to say something just because I'm afraid. That's where, I'm done. Right? I prefer being wrong and learning from that mistake than just being afraid. See, what do we got? We got to 3. We got to 3. This list used to be 21. It's probably even longer. So we're going to keep working through it. Thank you guys for your love, for your sincerity in listening, and hopefully we'll have some deeper conversations. Paz.